Getting into law school is hard enough, but doing well once you get in, that is a whole nother ballgame. So how did I learn to do well in law school, including straight A's my first semester? Wouldn't you like to know? Hey Legal Eagles, D. James Stone here, teaching you how to think like a lawyer so you can crush law school. I've been a big firm lawyer for over 10 years, but before that, I went to law school just like every other attorney. The thing is, when I got to law school, I completely freaked out. I'd wanted to be a lawyer for as long as I could remember, and I knew that that meant going to law school. But nothing could prepare me for what law school was actually like. A lot of kids come into law school and they're worried because they don't know anything about the law. I didn't exactly have that problems because, number one, I had tons of confidence, maybe way too much confidence. But I'd also had, experience with mock trial, and I'd watched hours and hours of Law and Order. So I felt like I had sort of a handle on the law itself. But then I got to class, and then I realized that I knew absolutely nothing about the law. And not only that, but the quality of the student in law school is unlike anything I'd experienced in college. The kids that come from Yale and Harvard, they just have this swagger. And I have never been in a room with such a high concentration of just A-type personalities and people that were just intellectually stunning. Just so many smart people all in one place. And then, of course, there are the gunners. And a gunner is someone who always raises their hand. They're always trying to answer the questions. They think they know more than they do, and they think it's their duty to explain to the professor all of the things that they know. They're really obnoxious, and they're really hard to avoid. But the problem is, when you're a first-year law student, you can't tell the gunners from the genuine geniuses either. They just seem like they have all the answers, and they seem like they have the right answers, too. You get to law school and you're surrounded by these unbelievably brilliant people, and you're also trying to learn essentially a new vocabulary. You're learning new substantive law that you've never seen in your entire life, and every class basically has its own vocabulary such that it's like learning a different language. And it's like learning French, German, and Spanish all at the same time in different classes. So it's just completely overwhelming when you get to law school. So my vision for what law school was going to be like did not match up with a reality. And, I tried to do my best. I tried to do the readings. I tried to engage with the professors. But there's just so much out there. And I remember one time in criminal law where we were discussing the different forms of criminal homicide. And I thought I spotted a flaw in the professor's argument. So I raised my hand and I explained my argument, and I said, Professor, isn't that just a semantic difference? Thinking I was going to win this argument. And the professor retorted back, well, isn't everything a semantic difference? Aren't we always talking about the differences between the definitions of words? And it got a huge laugh in front of the class, and I felt humiliated, and I didn't realize I was going to have to be debating with essentially a postmodern professor and who was a total relativist. But, he made a good point, and I'll never forget, what it felt like to be skewered at the end of a logical knife of this professor. But that was not a situation that I was used to being in. And yet every single day in class, I would find myself on the horns of a dilemma, or I wouldn't understand the arguments that were being made, or I felt like I just couldn't keep up with the readings and the arguments that were going on in class. Now, in the past, it was rare that I didn't think that I was one of the smartest people in the room. But in law school, I definitely was not the smartest person in the room. And I probably wasn't even in the top half. I mean, I really felt like I was surrounded by intellectual geniuses. And after class, it seemed like everyone was actually studying harder than I was. I don't know how it was possible, but they seemed to find more time in the day to study, to read their cases, to read supplements. Everyone was not only really smart, but no one was slacking off, and everyone was an incredibly hard worker. So I knew that I had to figure something out, because I couldn't just skate by with the habits that I had in undergrad. and procrastinating like I used to. I knew that I was going to have some different tactic in law school because otherwise I was just going to get left behind by my classmates. And I knew that just couldn't rely on innate talent because everyone seemed to be incredibly talented. But worse than that, everyone seemed to be working at least as hard, if not harder. So I knew that I couldn't rely on innate talent, and I also couldn't outwork my cohort either. I realized I had to come up with a system. I had to try something different. In addition to studying the law for my classes, I also decided to study law school itself. I figured there must be a way to go about it better and smarter. So I read everything I possibly could about the tactics of law school itself. And I got tips from upperclassmen. I talked to them about what worked in their first year and what didn't work. I talked to practicing attorneys. I really tried to reach out to get as much on the ground experience as I could because I figured that experience is the best teacher. And you only get one shot at your first year in law school. So I really had to make the most of it. And it really seemed like after you go through your first year, all the upperclassmen were completely changed. And so I had to figure out how they made that transition and how they learned to do what worked and discarded what didn't work. So, in addition to reading about law school itself, I started reading about practice exams. And I not only that, but I tried to do as many practice exams as possible. In those days, there used to be more public databases where you could go to different law schools' websites and you could download more past exams. And I figured that there might be some commonalities between different exams. And lo and behold, I found that almost everyone used this weird sort of law school exam called an issue spotting exam, where you're given a fact pattern. And what I found is that issue spotting exams were really unlike any of the stuff that you do in class in law school. When you're in class, you're basically doing appellate opinion autopsies. So you get an opinion from an appellate court that lays out the facts and the legal reasoning and comes out with a particular holding. And you're basically doing a dissection or an autopsy of that opinion. But the thing is, you're not tested on almost any of that information. The amount of information that you glean from a particular case is so small compared to what you actually do on a final exam. And because there were so many commonalities between the final exams, I figured out what works for those finals. And I learned that the kind of in-class dissection that you do on appellate opinions, while that's important and you use that in practice, you don't really use it on the final exam. So I really emphasized my practice exams. I really emphasized learning the strategies of how to write a really good issue spotting exam answer. Because all the finals are basically the same format. And in the end of the day, all the strategies that I come up with, all the experience that I got from the upperclassmen, and all the experience that I had doing my practice exams, ended up having a good result. I remember my first semester when I got the report card and it's given to you in an envelope, and so much relies on those grades. I mean, you use your first semester grades to get your 1L summer job. When you come back for your second year to do interviews with law firms, like all they look at basically are your first year grades. And when I got that first report card, I had it in my hand and my hands were shaking. And I just couldn't open it up in the classroom that we were giving it to. So I walked outside. UCLA Law has this really beautiful courtyard that's surrounded on three sides by buildings. It's got huge trees. And I sat down on a bench. I opened it up and I saw the picket fence, AAA. And we only had 3 classes that semester, and I got straight A's. And to this day, I don't think I have ever had a single better feeling moment than when I picked up the phone and I called my parents and I said, "Hey, mom and dad, I just got my first semester grades. I want you to know I got straight A's. Everything's going to be okay. And my parents were yelling and crying, and it was just one of the best moments I've ever had in my entire life. And it as I predicted it would, it set me up for a really good first year job. It set me up for getting the big firm job that I wanted in Los Angeles, and nothing has really ever compared to that. And frankly, your first semester is so important. It's by far the most important part of law school. And I was able to keep up the momentum. I graduated with a whole lot more A's. And the next 2.5 years of law school were intense, but they were nothing like that first semester. I used a lot of those skills in mock trial and moot court, where I went on to win a couple of national tournaments. And between my grades and my extracurriculars, I was able to get set up to work for a big firm, an AmLaw 100 firm in Los Angeles, and I was able to get my dream job as a civil litigator, and I've been a litigator ever since. Now, the story of how I became a big firm lawyer is one we'll have to save for another day. But if you want to hear more stories about my law school experience or my experience as an attorney, check out this short playlist I put together. It has a bunch of legal war stories, and I think you'll really enjoy the videos. So click on this playlist, and I'll see you in the next video.